Now, people sometimes say a person who needs no introduction, and then they'll spend like 30 minutes introducing them, right? But Susan Sarandon really doesn't need an introduction. You know she's an Academy Award-winning actress, but also UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador and a fantastic activist.
Thank you.
And that's why you're here today. Thank you for coming on the Young Turks. We appreciate it. We've been covering all day, all week, the North Dakota Access Pipeline issue. And I know that's what's got you motivated right now.
And I want to say thank you because Lord knows there's not enough people that are covering it, certainly in mainstream media. And that's one of the things that's been so frustrating is that people have such misconceptions or don't know anything at all about what's going on there. And it's such an emergency situation. And these people are protecting not only their water, but our water. Yep. And to have silence on the part of all the, except Jill Stein, all the people running for president, to have our own president barely dealing with it is just so infuriating. And I've been doing what I can. I'm in the middle of a project and I haven't even been able to go east to see my 2-week-old grandson, so I haven't been able to get to North Dakota. I went to D.C. beforehand, before I came here, when they filed their suit, so I was there protesting. But I was sitting at home and I just thought, you know, when I saw who was paying for who's responsible for keeping the pipeline going, I realized I was, because I'm in Chase, I'm in Citibank, you know, and so I looked up and it's Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citigroup, of course Goldman Sachs and all those guys that you'd expect to be part of it. And I thought, we have to divest. We have to do what we did in South Africa. We have to put our money where our mouths are, and we have to find a way to say we're not going to be part of what you're doing.
So I want to get to that in 1 second. So it's hashtag bank exit. I think it's a really interesting idea. And you're going to spook them, Susan. When you talk about money, then they get worried, okay? And I want to talk about President Obama too. But for those people who are not familiar with it, I wanted to have you explain in your words why you're so upset about what's happening there. Now, we've got the pipeline being built, and it's got fossil fuels, obviously, that it's going to carry from North Dakota to Illinois. It's a $3.8 billion project. But a lot of the Native Americans there and now environmentalists and other groups are protesting. For the people who don't know, why are they protesting?
Okay, well, this has a special bad thing happening because they are putting the pipeline through land that is sacred land that has would be the same as, you know, digging up graves in a cemetery or tearing down a cathedral for them. So these people that have suffered so much already because of our greed and our hostility are now in yet another battle trying to protect not just their water but our water, because this watershed services 17 million people. And you know, Alabama just had another explosion. I mean, these pipelines, it's not if they'll leak, it's when and exactly where. So to go under the Missouri River and put all that water is very upsetting for a lot of people, but especially for those whose land is being violated. And they're being charged, I think you pointed this out, you know, with federal offenses, which means that you could lose a whole generation, these people that are being locked up there. So that's in itself very upsetting. But the whole idea that you're putting profit over people, over our water, which is the most basic thing that everybody needs. We have this idea that we can own the land and make profit off of it, and therefore anything is justifiable. The water protectors are saying this belongs to everybody. This is a resource that belongs to everybody. You can't put it at risk. And so what's at stake here is a double whammy. It's not only what you're doing to the people that live there, but it's this whole principle. You can't reroute it. You have to do an environmental study. You have to call upon Obama to do an environmental study, which will prove that it's not a good idea. And we have to rethink the way that we get energy. And this is an example of big money breaking all the rules, and our political candidates who they've been paid for, their campaigns have been paid for by this array of people that are paying for this pipeline, are not saying anything.
Yeah, so a lot of folks keep talking about law and order, but in this case, you're supposed to do an environmental impact statement. One wasn't done.
Right.
President Obama and the federal government has said that they are not allowed to drill in the water. Now they're, as we showed in our footage, story that we broke, they're half a mile from the river, and no one's actually monitoring. You got all those cops. Nobody's actually turning around and looking to see if they're breaking the law by drilling into the river. So if you care about law and order, shouldn't you make sure they follow the government's rules? And then the third part of it is that might be tribal land. And so if we have a treaty, doesn't America hold its word? Aren't we supposed to be a people of our word? And so if it's a treaty that said that it is their land, well, we should adjudicate that. We should figure that out before we drill. And so that leads me to my question about Obama. You mentioned him earlier because he got asked about it today, and he said, we're going to let this play out for a couple of weeks. I don't know what that means.
Well, it's
does
already
that mean
been
they're allowed to
playing
drill
out.
or not allowed to drill? What does that mean?
Well, it means he's stalling till the election's over is what it means. And you would think that part of his legacy would be doing the right thing. It's so disappointing. It's so disappointing because, all these people courted the Native American vote and wrote all this stuff about, how they're going to respect the land and the traditions and everything else. And now when push comes to shove, profit is winning out. And certainly Obama, the least he could do is ask for an environmental study. And that's why people have to call the White House and say, not just that you're against this, but we want an environmental review is what it's called, I believe. And it's just been, I understand, Trump saying and doing what he does has shaken people to their very core. But what about this? This doesn't shake you to your core. This doesn't upset you actually strip searching young girls, throwing them naked in cells. Crazy stuff that you wouldn't even believe is America. And there's no one observing. There's a few journalists who are risking getting arrested because they were arresting journalists or risking rubber bullets and mace and everything else. But where are the observers? Where's the Department of Justice? And it's because it's racist. It's because these are expendable people. And there was a reason they didn't put it in Bismarck, the capital, which was where it originally was supposed to go, because they knew better and they said, move it over there. Those people don't have a voice. So we're seeing a perfect example of racism at work for profit. And all the hatred that has been released in the Trump campaign, which is despicable and horrible. But what about the reinforcement of racism that happens quietly in boardrooms, that happens quietly in banks, that happens smoothly, seamlessly? That's really upsetting.
So the pipeline was originally supposed to go by Bismarck, and they decided,
the capital
of North Dakota. And they said, let's move it near the native land instead. Now that decision was made. Now you couldn't justifiably say, well, maybe they don't, maybe it wasn't about race. You can say. I think you make a good case and a compelling case that it might have been about race. But even if it isn't about race, at a minimum, everyone has to concede they thought that it might leak. Because if you thought that it has no chance of leaking, well, why not put it near Bismarck? If there's no chance of any problems at all, why not run it right through the middle of Bismarck?
Yeah.
So obviously you guys know there could be a problem too. And they're like, well, if there's going to be a problem, we don't want it near Bismarck. We want it near the Native American land. And then you can reach your own conclusion as to why they want that. And by the way, one reasonable conclusion is there's less people there. I understand that. But there's no question.
Yeah, but why do you care if there's less people? Only because it might leak.
Only because it might leak. On that, there can be no dispute.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, of course, just in Alabama, on Monday, this week, a giant explosion at a pipeline. One person killed, 5 people injured. What happened? I thought that you couldn't have any safety problems at a pipeline. And in fact, in North Dakota, Associated Press did some great reporting there. They pressed the governor of North Dakota, and finally they admitted, there's been hundreds of spills.
Yeah.
They said, we didn't want to over-report the spills. What does that mean? You're the government.
Reported it all, I guess.
Because you're supposed to protect us, but they view it, whether it's the cops or the state of North Dakota, they view it like it's their job to protect the corporations, to protect the profits. That's why what you're doing is very interesting. Because if you affect their profits, and all of a sudden you've gotten their attention. So are you saying these banks are invested in the North Dakota Access Pipeline?
Yes, and you can go online and see many more. These are just some of the big ones that touch our everyday lives. I hadn't even thought of it, and I cared so much about this. And then when I saw the list, and I see Bank of America, Citigroup, and Chase and everything, I'm like, wow, how can I keep going and using my debit card and getting my cash out, knowing that I'm supporting the very people that are putting this pipeline through and doing everything that I'm against. And so I think we have to be so much more attentive to what we're buying, and because that, we're never going to find power giving up power just because they've fallen off their horse and had some kind of epiphany. That's not going to happen. It's going to happen the way it happened in South Africa. It's going to happen because we say we are not going to visit there. The same thing with gay rights. We're not going to visit there. We're not going to put money into this company when they're doing this thing, you know. And so what we're calling for is people just to film themselves exiting their bank. We're going to find other banks so you can go into credit unions, but I want to make sure any banks that we recommend are clean banks. I have been told that there are some, and we're going to check them out, and so that you can put your money where your principals are and say to them, and give us the videos that say, you know, this, I went there and this is what happened, and tell them that we're awake and that we understand now the connection between how we're spending our money. And there's some big people, like, you know, that do these documentaries, like Leonardo DiCaprio. I hope he wakes up, and I want to know where his money is. I want to know where all the green nonprofits, where's their money? You know, we have to start connecting the dots. And I'm not blaming anybody who's got their money, because my money's in some of these places, but it's time now that you really rethink and at least give them a call and say, look, listen, you know, we can't take this anymore. You've got to do something about this, and make them aware that we're awake. Because one of the great things that's happening now with all of this disillusionment and anger that's happened after the primaries, it's really, we can't afford to be disillusioned. We have to take action. We can't afford just to be angry. We have to look at these water protectors and what they're doing, open-armed, full of love, and saying, look, we're going to change it, but we're not going to change it violently. We're going to find other ways. And now that people are awake and they understand how much money is in everything and how little they've been empowered in terms of the way voting has come down in this, we have to change things. And I have kids and now grandkids, and I care about their future.
And so you're going to take your money out of these banks as well.
Yeah.
And are you going to tape it? How are you going to do this? Because you were talking about...
So far, I've only done it over the phone. I haven't gone into the actual bank. I've gotten my people that are my managers and just said, you know, I had already gotten out of oil and everything, I thought, you know, when I started being more conscientious in terms of my investments. And sometimes they have these bundling things and you don't know where they're putting your money. And so I had to get out of those because you have no control. So my answer to that is don't go into the bundling thing. But that's, you know, it takes, money management people are not used to having to deal with those questions. But if you ask them to, they do research and they can figure it out. So I had already done that, and now this thing happened. So just the other night, I was on the phone with you know, my guys saying, I don't know how complicated this is going to be, but I have to tell you, we have to do this. So, you know, start figuring it out, and then I've got to pull everything. So I don't know if I'll be able to actually go, because I'm in here again and not in New York, which is where my main bank is.
And so when you do it, you've got to let them know that this is why you're doing it. Okay, that's what's important.
Yes, and that's why the hashtag, and that's why, you know, signing this petition and making it really clear, and that's why we're hoping everybody starts to spread the word and do two things: ask Obama for an environmental study, and secondly of all, tell their banks that they're going to pull out because of their involvement in the Dakota Access Pipeline.
So hashtag bank exit, and we'll have the links at the bottom of this video for the websites, the petitions, all the places that you can go. And I got to tell you, I'm telling you that you're going to scare them, and that's because divestment works. And so whenever anybody talks about divestment, people go, "Whoa, wait a minute, don't do that. That's crazy. That's radical." Because affecting their profits is what they view to be the most dangerous, most radical thing you can do, because they've built their whole system around profit. So
and secrecy, non-transparency. This is the thing, you know, to find out who you want to vote for, and you look at the ties that they have, you know pretty much what the scenario is, no matter what they're going to say. And so all of that stuff has to be kept secret. And because of you guys and because of other people that are into all of this and passing the word, not in mainstream media, because unfortunately mainstream media is mostly owned by the same guys. So the well is poisoned, so you have to go outside the well and start to find a clean source. And we have each other, and there are many more of us, and we have to support each other and support them.
Yeah, and not only are the mainstream media owned by giant corporations that are worth billions of dollars, but they also have advertisers. And a lot of them are banks. So when you go around, say, and take money out of Citigroup or Bank of America or these other banks, they're going to get skittish.
Good. I mean, and I have to say, I feel bad for these violent policemen that are there, because here you have these people with no weapons, open arms, singing, praying, and they're told to go in and they start being so violent. They must feel full of self-loathing. I mean, that's what's making them be so horrible, because how could you feel good about standing there overly militarized like that against people that are just praying? You know, this is, they're doing their job, but it's a horrible job. And I think they need to divest from whoever's making them do that.
When you look like the stormtroopers in the movie, you begin to wonder if you're the good guys or not.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so
they need a rebranding. They do not look like good guys.
Yeah, and so we captured the footage today. We showed it earlier on the Young Turks. You know, because in the past they kept saying, "Oh, the protesters are causing the violence, causing us to act." Well, we've got it on tape. There's no violence whatsoever. They're in the water, and they went over, and you see it. They say, "We told them we love them." And that's the old civil rights way of doing it. I remember Fred Shuttlesworth, a great civil rights leader. His house got firebombed. And then he was beaten outside of the government building for trying to enter in the way that whites do, twice. And in the middle of a beating, one of the guys says, "Why won't you fight back?" And he says to him, "Because I love you."
Kills me.
Yeah. And so that's what these guys are doing. And now we've got cameras there, and you see who's causing the violence. In this case, it happens to be state violence.
Well, they asked
why
me,
did you have to pepper spray them? I don't know why you had to.
They asked me, I got asked on CNN, but what about the violence that's coming towards the police? And that's been reported. And I said, but you don't see any film. Is there any film of any violence? That's another one of those myths that's being promoted through your national TV, your corporate national TV, saying that the protesters that the water protectors are violent, and they're not. And they found one guy that got out of a car, and I don't know if you guys seen the footage of that, with the gun that they talked down. I mean, that was the most moving thing I've ever seen. I mean, that's...
So he appeared to be an instigator. He's from the Dakota Access Pipeline. He's an employee of there. He's got a red bandana covering his face, and he's got a rifle, and he's among the water protectors. What are you doing there? So people were justifiably concerned that he was going to shoot in the direction of the cops, therefore justifying the violence to come in and take out the protesters who are calling themselves water protectors, right? So the one guy from the Dakota Access Pipeline is the guy with the gun. The cops are the ones with the weapons. So far, the one picture they said, "Oh, we got this older woman who fired on the cops," and we have the picture. She has a prayer stick.
Yeah.
They never found a revolver. There was no revolver. They said there was.
No.
In the beginning, they said there was pipe bombs. Really? Where's the pipe bombs? If there were pipe bombs, they would have already wiped that place clean. There's no pipe bombs. You want to justify your mine-resistant Humvees that you paid so much money for, and those are your toys, and you like to play with them. But this government is supposed to represent us in a democracy, the citizens. And now we live in a state where they represent only the corporations. So if that's the case, then you got to do what Susan's doing and saying, okay, well then we're going to tweak the profits of your corporations that are investing in that until you think it's not good for business.
Right, and I think that, this is the perfect time to really look at this construction of how things have been going all along, both from the point of view of how we get our information, who we believe, who we don't believe, and just how much we'll take. Because again, whoever wins this election, I'm pretty sure we know who will, but whoever wins this election, we can't rest. It's not going to solve any of the things we're suffering from right now. That's clear. And so the good news is that, as I said, people are awake and they're ready to participate, and people are running for office, but we have to have each other's backs, and we have to pass on information that people aren't getting, and we have to come with alternatives outside the box to how to solve these problems, because we can't turn to old methods. it's falling apart, and that's the good news and the bad news. Because now that it's falling apart, we can find something better. And there's, I hate it when people go on about the millennials, because my experience with millennials has been nothing but that they're awake. They're furious, maybe, and I understand they fight so hard, and then they get to the vote and their names aren't there and they're pissed off, and I get that, but they're informed and they care, and they're not as interested in consuming. And it's the old people like me that want to stay in this system and hold on to the old guard, even though they see it's completely corrupt. And so we have to be brave and say, okay, we're going to form something new, and we're going to start making a difference. And this is a perfect time to see that. I mean, you just look at the visuals. It's just mind-boggling. All this love and people on horses and praying, and then this lineup of these horrible-looking, over-militarized police there. You'd think, what country is this? What is going on? And the fact that our president is waiting to see how it unfolds, I don't know how much more can unfold.
Yep. Susan Sarandon, an activist who talks the talk and walks the walk.
Thank you, sir.
Hashtag bank exit this time. All right, thank you so much.
You.
I really appreciate you joining us on the Young Turks.
Thank you.
And thank you for your voice.